Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Bulletproof Selling. My name is Sean Rhodes, the Chief Sales Sergeant here at Bulletproof Selling and author of the book Bulletproof Selling, a guide for systemizing sales on the battlefield of business. Now, here at Bulletproof Selling, whether it's your first chance to visit with us or you're here for the 160 something episode, you should know that hope is not a sales strategy. And so we are here every single week to help you as a salesperson, as a sales leader, as an entrepreneur, remove hope from how you sell and how you serve. My time as a U.S. Marine Corps war correspondent getting sent into teams that by definition could not rely on hope. It taught me the value of systems and processes and continuous improvement, things that I'm also seeing out of every great salesperson that I've been able to interview. And over the course of 150 plus episodes, we've had a lot of great people as interviewees, folks that were Hall of Fame speakers, best-selling authors, folks that are chief revenue officers leading teams around the world, helping other salespeople remove hope from how they operate as well. And out of every single one of these episodes, we build a sales system with our guest, a system that you can use no matter the size of your team or the size of your goals. Now, if you've been in sales for longer than, let's say, I don't know, 5 minutes, you know that you have some competing priorities. You've got the quota that you have to meet. You've got the activity that you have to generate today, the calls you have to make, the voicemails you've got to leave, the emails you've got to send, the social media messages you need to send out, all in the hopes, which for a lot of salespeople, it does fall back on hope of establishing a relationship, something that you can use to show that your product, your service, your value is there for this other prospect. And so out of all of the things that you have to do, it's often very difficult to discern in the moment what are the things that are going to make the biggest impact toward my goals? Well, today's guest is going to help us address that very thing. How do we take all the things that we know to do and actually choose the right thing at the right time? So it's my pleasure to welcome to the show Mr. Ben Fiechtner, the CRO of a wonderful company called Clary, and we're going to learn what they do as well. So Ben, welcome, sir, to Bulletproof Selling.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean, for having me.
So you're coming to us from New York City. I'm down here in Tampa, Florida. So think East Coast, about as separated as we can get, but
Yep.
still here to help salespeople. So Ben, talk to me a little bit about your background. A quick glance at your LinkedIn profile tells me you've been in sales with some of the largest sales enablement organizations in the world for quite a while. How did you end up in sales first? Always a great origin story there. And then talk to me a little bit about what you and your company do today to serve salespeople.
That's great. I kind of fell into sales, to be honest with you. So I was, in my undergrad at University of Wisconsin, I thought I wanted to be going to politics or practice law and help, make a change through that lens. And actually, we started a t-shirt company, believe it or not, my freshman year, $300 out of our backpacks. We sold out in 2 days. We're like, hey, we're on to something. And then I think from our first big sale, actually to the university bookstore, and I was like, holy cow, this is really fun. And I used to think a lot about, becoming a lawyer as a way to help hopefully see people or get people to see your side or your point of view. I think I realized really quickly from a sales profession, it's almost the same thing too, right? As helping to help see people what they need, maybe not necessarily what they want. So that was kind of the sales origin story, was actually selling t-shirts in college
Hmm.
in my freshman year dorm room, lit up my passion for sales, if you will, and professional selling.
And
I think
then,
the
of
second,
course, a couple of transitions there, right? I want to hear
yeah,
about Salesforce too, because that's
yeah,
got to be the gorilla in the room.
yeah. I think so. What's funny is out of school, I actually went to General Electric, so I went into their
Okay.
commercial leadership program where they train you for 18 months, which is an unbelievable program. And I don't know how much they invested in us, right, to learn all of the 101, 201, 301 as it comes to selling, negotiating, positioning, point of views, all that fun stuff. So I was selling capital medical equipment in the Bay Area on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. I would work from the AdWords bullpen, right, in Google, because that was where all the folks my age were working at the time. So I got to be around tech, and I realized there was a lot more money and margin leasing the internet than there was necessarily leasing capital medical equipment. And I
Hmm.
started to fall in love with just tech selling. Moved to Chicago. Salesforce called me. They were starting a healthcare and life sciences vertical. I think I was, the second or third employee in Chicago in the healthcare and life sciences vertical, and took the plunge into technology sales, right? And spent 10 years at the big blue cloud, who also, I think, invented a lot of things as it relates to sales enablement and hopefully training, you know, world-class enterprise software sellers, and just rose through the ranks throughout there. So interesting story for sure. And I think, like anyone's career, you don't know how you actually got up there, but it all worked out in the end.
And then talk to me about Clary. What is it that you all do to help salespeople today?
Yeah, so Clary, and it's funny. When I first joined here, I told my dad. He was like, "What? So tell me more about Clary." I'm like, "We sell things to help people sell better." And he laughed, and he's in the medical profession, was like, they pay you for that? I'm like, yeah, it's
Yeah.
actually really, really, really fun. And it's my dream job, getting to talk to, CROs 80% of the time. But yeah, so what Clary does is we started out as a predictive forecasting tool. So I think the most important process in business is, am I going to meet, beat, or miss my number for not only the CRO, but the CFO and that entire C-suite and board, if you will. So we, 11 years ago, created tools to help drive predictive forecasting. And since then, we've grown into, how do you just drive all of the things for both seller productivity to make their lives easier, but then also just trying to help find the holes in your business, to make sure you're maximizing your time over target, or whatever it is, to hit the monthly, weekly, annual goal.
Nice, nice. So you actually have created a version of a crystal ball for a sales team to be able to say, you want this future state, here are the things you have to begin doing today.
Sean, you should be in marketing more than me. Yes, I think that's a great answer. And I think that's a thought, right? Is one, of course, you can call a number, and a lot of folks will say, hey, I trust my gut to understand where I'm going to land on the quarter. But do I know what the biggest burning fires are, and what are the things that I should be putting out for second or third? I think is hopefully the beauty of our platform, and the beauty of, good forecast cadences when implemented correctly.
Nice. Love it. Love it. So then you get to have a lot of conversations with CROs. We deal with a lot of people in Bulletproof Selling here. We got CROs that we're serving. We've got those sales managers that we serve. And then, of course, the folks on the front line of sales, banging the phone every day, developing relationships. Across all of that, where do you see folks falling back on hope more than they should, given the large amount of conversations you get to have with sellers?
It's a great question, and one that I was prepared to know that was coming, of course. No, I think the biggest thing that we look at this is, and we talk, like, I think about this a lot, right? There's not enough hours in the day for sellers. Yeah. It's the beauty of it, and folks, often say salespeople are lazy, and that's not anywhere near the case. It's just they want to get quickest from point A to point B. I think the hard part is determining the path that should get you there the fastest, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of fires. There's a lot of people yelling and screaming, or potentially places that you're more comfortable than others. So I think the thing that they fall back on hope is just not knowing where to spend their time and where they can move the needle the most as to what helps them get to quota. They just chase the shiny object or chase the biggest burning platform issue. And it's much better to be more prescriptive in what you're going to do first, second, and third.
So it's not just doing all the things, but it's doing the right things at the right time. And as a salesperson, we might not know what that looks like. So I'll tie it back into the military.
Yeah.
Often when we're out on a patrol, and when I got to in bed with infantry teams doing this stuff, and the highest performers in the military, there was a lot going on all the time. Whether it was being in a crowded market, you're walking down the street, you don't know what's a threat, but you've got a lot of things to worry about. So we had to learn how to hyper focus on the things that were actually going to make the biggest impact to our mission success and get everybody home. So that's how we learned to do it in the military. Now in sales, we're going to talk about a way to allow sellers to do that as well. So I log into my CRM, I open my email account up. I've got a lot of things that I could be doing. And there are a couple of things that are even pretty close to becoming clients, right? Maybe I need to devote some time there, but really that may not be the highest priority thing that I have to do today. And if I've only got a limited amount of time to make a big impact or a small window with a potential buyer, I've got to know what that thing is. So we're going to talk about how to do that. Of course, it means removing hope. It means not hoping I happen to land on the right thing. And so across the military, we've learned over the years that the more hope we remove, the better we get. And that means replacing hope, trimming it away. So in the military, we're massive on acronyms, as I'm sure you know. So are you in tech, as a matter of fact? I know that for a fact. So we use this acronym TRIM because we're trimming hope away when we build systems here at Bulletproof Selling. We're going to build a system that we haven't ever touched before, which is knowing what to do at the right time to get the right result. So this acronym TRIM, the T in TRIM stands for trigger. If I'm a seller or I'm a manager and I want to trigger a system for myself or my people to know what is the right thing I need to do today to get the biggest impact, or the right thing I need to do right now, when do I trigger this? Is it something that happens every morning for me as I'm kind of assessing what my schedule looks like? Is it something I need to be doing at the beginning of the week, or maybe the month, or even the quarter? When would you recommend a seller execute a system to help them really figure out what is the right thing? And we'll jump into what those steps are here in a minute, but I need to know, when do I pull this off the shelf and begin to use it?
Yeah, I think so. The way I think about it is actually through what we would call it a forecast cadence, right? So if you look at the 13-week quarter for any enterprise software company or any sales company for that matter, right? And you're looking at, what am I doing differently in week 1 versus week 2 versus week 3, all the way through the 13 weeks of the quarter. I think for me, the way I look at it is probably more in a weekly structure, right? Of as I'm looking through my leaders and their frontline leaders and their individual ICs, a little bit of how do I set up their day to say, hey, when they log in and they get on that forecast call or that one-on-one or that QBR, how do I make sure they're looking at the right metrics of their business? So in week one, right, that's always going to be, we're looking at slip deals because that's the surest way to shore up the next quarter, right? We're looking at deal back, walk up, and commit. We're looking at your pipe gen quarter plus one. And what I think about this is in terms of like, how often are you doing this? I think it's probably more likely on a weekly basis to make sure
Okay.
you're focused on the right things, but give you the metrics to say, based on where you're at in the quarter against those 13 weeks, here's what I'd be looking at now to make sure you're building a long-term sustainable business, to your point, versus necessarily just chasing the biggest brush fire or chasing the biggest deal, is how we like to think about it.
And I know a lot of sellers are in a role where they're responsible not just for selling it, but also for customer service on the back end.
100%. Yeah.
And often that means whatever that burning issue is for that customer, that's the thing that causes everything else to stop on the seller side. And that's a problem because I've had a lot of sellers tell me, when do I have time to sell? I'm dealing with customer problems all day. Well, we need a system like the one you and I are building right now to help us deal with that. So if the trigger then is on a weekly cadence to sit down and ask, what are the things that are really going to move me toward that quarterly goal or toward those goals that I have set by my leadership team? And let's move into the R in trim, which is making it repeatable. So like a checklist, like we used all the time in the military and like folks in tech use all the time when they're developing that new piece of software, launching that service. What are the 4 or 5 or 6 steps I need to run before I pick up the phone or before I start answering emails? What are those things I can do to make sure that I am paying attention and taking action on the right things at the right time today?
Yeah, and I think for us, the way I'd look at it is, this may be too much into the tooling specifically, but when you look at like a Clary dashboard, you could use this for anything. Just make sure that your revenue objectives that you're aligned to. So to your point, if I'm an account manager that has both new sales and post sales, or or if I'm just a hunter, do I have the right data that I look at on a daily basis? If we're doing this on a weekly piece, how do I have the right data on a daily basis to look at across create, convert, close, and potentially churn or retention to make sure that I understand where things, like I can get through the signal to the noise, if you will. If I can actually understand if these are my 4 biggest revenue objectives that I have to accomplish on this fiscal year, and that could be set by the CRO, that could be set by the individual contributor, what are the things that I need to look at on a daily basis to make sure that I'm keeping myself honest? To your point, there's always going to be an angry customer and you should always help satisfy those things. But what are the ones that I can hand off to my CSM and say, hey, you go take this because I have these 3 things prioritized. So I think similar to your, a little bit different, of course, and the stakes are nowhere near as high as what you were going through right in the military, but looking at what is my checklist, what are my top 4 metrics or dashboards in the cockpit, whatever you want to call it, to say this is where I should go spend my time, is how I would think about that on a daily basis in a repeatable fashion.
Nice. So I've got, look at the data to benchmark it. Is it accurate? Because not all data is accurate. I may be looking at data from last week or last quarter. So based on the data, is it accurate? Is it up to date? And do I understand where I am against my quarterly goals? Then once I get that information down, then at least I know where the gaps are. Now, out of those gaps, help me understand as a salesperson, because I know you manage a couple hundred salespeople, folks that are in charge of selling Clary's products and services. What would you tell them to do next? So I've got my data in front of me. I know where I am against goal. How do I then use that as a focus point for what action I need to be taking next?
So I think I think about it through the FLM's lens, probably first, so the frontline manager, and in a leadership lens of, once you have a standard data platform or standard data visualization, to your point, and then a standard process that you're looking at the same things by week, you can start to manage by exception. And I think it's especially true for leadership, right? Of like, hey, I can look by region of who has the most amount of stall pipe, who has an execution problem, who may have a top of funnel problem, which helps me understand where I should actually coach and spend my time on a continuous basis. But I think that also helps the individual region. I think for the individual contributor, I think if you have the right things to say, hey, and a lot of my ICs look at this, like, where was I this time last quarter? This time, this quarter, last year, in terms of how much pipe coverage did I have, in terms of what was my conversion, what was my win rates, to make sure that I can actually track and predict where I'm going to end is really, really important. So one, through the FLM lens or through the leader lens, manage by exception by benchmarking everybody against each other, and look at historicals. For the individual contributor, of course, you can look at your peers, but also specifically like having the data to look at your territory, same time last quarter, same time last year, I think gives you a sense of, am I on the right track to achieve the revenue objectives I want to get after?
And if you notice that you are off track against where you were last year or last quarter, now I had a lot more calls in last quarter.
Yep.
That tells me against goal, because I know so many calls equals so many meetings. I should probably
Yep.
start taking action on my calls or on my relationships or on the proposals I get out the door. So that'll tell you what to do next. And it may be all of those things, which means you got to really strip it back down to the very basics. And so
Exactly.
when we get to that point, then if I'm noticing after a quarter of using this, let's say every week I'm taking the time to get my data in front of me, figure out where I was last quarter, last year on this cycle that I'm on, and what I need to be doing next. The iron trim is something we really paid attention to in the military, which was improve. I want to know how you would advise a team or an individual contributor improve how they're prioritizing their tasks to make an impact on the right thing at the right time. Do I need to look at specific sets of data differently? Do I need to really look at my customer conversations? What would you tell a seller to do to improve the way that they're prioritizing?
I think the first thing, and through the leader's lens on the improve side of, um, I'm not big on like the weekly enablement, the webinar, the hey, this is the things that you got to do to check the box. I'm much bigger on like the micro moments. How do you help that person find the right answer, right? And coach and mentor folks in the moment. So I think for the individual frontline leader, I think that's the I, if you will, of the improvement is just continuous improvement, clear as kind, all of those fun things that we talk about to make sure that people are actually getting the right things dialed. For the individual contributor, I think it is holding yourself, like if you have a process and you're rigorous and you're actually measuring yourself, because a lot of people talk about, right, if we all have the same goals at the start of at the starting line, but it is the people that actually put the right process in place are the ones that are actually going to be the most successful. So a lot of this is the improvement is the continuous self-awareness of where you're at against your journey or against your goals, and then asking for help in the right ways. But a lot of the basics is just understanding, to your point, do I have enough pipe coverage? Have I made enough pipe calls? What's different this time last year? And then me raising my hand and saying, hey, I need help from either my pre-sales, my manager, whoever it may be, to help drive the goals that you're trying to accomplish. I think is the individual thing for the person is just getting the right process in place is 95% of the job.
It is. It is. And it's so often as sellers, we're rewarded for being as autonomous as we can be with as little supervision required. The problem with that, of course, is that we end up breathing our own exhaust. We get great
Yeah.
results for a while. The market changes and we start wondering,
Yeah.
well, why isn't the thing I was doing last quarter working this quarter?
Yeah.
Without asking for help, you may never figure that out
Yeah.
because your
Yeah.
leaders have more of a strategic view of the battlefield than you do. So it's important to ask for help, get that feedback, say, listen, I'm struggling here. Could you help me build a system?
Yeah.
And if your leaders won't work with you to do that, well, then you need to go talk to folks like the CRO of Clary, where he'll offer you a
Yeah. You're
job.
probably
I'm
in the right
sure
job. Yeah. Yeah.
if you're that focused and motivated.
Yeah.
I know you got positions for sellers. So
Oh,
if we've got our trigger, making this repeatable, making it
yep.
improvable in various ways. Now the M in trim is something that all CROs are concerned with, which is measuring. How am
Yep.
I going to measure the result of this system? Because as a seller or as a frontline manager, if my folks are prioritizing the right things, I'm probably going to see the needle move in the big things like gross sales. But what are the
Yep.
things I could be measuring just to make sure that they are prioritizing in the right ways throughout the quarter? Do I measure closed conversations? Do I measure new conversations? Do I measure pipeline velocity? What are
Yep.
some things you recommend that I keep my eye on if we're looking at metrics each week to know, hey, I'm trending in the right direction here?
So I think you have to look at in the way we set up the 13-week forecast cadence, if you will. A lot of it is like one top of funnel,
Mm.
one conversion, one execution in terms of close, and then the last is like churn and retention. And it's hard, especially as an individual seller, to look at this of like, hey, I'm halfway through the year and I haven't hit my number. I'm at 40%. I was at 67%. And it's easy to get down. I think to your point, making it repeatable, having a process, actually understanding what help you need to ask for is a huge first step. I think the second piece of it is, though, is look at your business holistically. So if you're looking across, create, convert, close, and churn, if you look at those four different categories, are we trending in the right direction? Meaning, do I have more top of funnel coverage? Do I have the right, percentage, whatever your business mandates or dictates based on historicals of 2x, 4x, whatever it may be? How much faster is my I guess so that's create top of funnel. The second piece on convert, how fast is that pipeline progressing through where I'm at? So
Mhm.
how long are certain deals in how many stages or how many days are in a certain stage? All of those types of things. What's my breakdown between S1, S2, S3 based on the stage or the category of best case, most likely, or commit? I think the last piece on execution is, yeah, the numbers. How are you doing? Like, are you hitting the goals on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis? And then churn and retention, the same thing for us, where we look at, both gross retention rate and net retention rate and help measure those things on a weekly basis so folks can actually look at the trends against themselves.
And what you've talked about through this entire system is something that I know a lot of salespeople, they don't take the time to do because they love to be in the saddle running as
Yeah.
fast as they can down the track. But just taking the time to step back at the beginning of the week and look at your business strategically.
Yeah.
This is something that I recommend every salesperson do. And even if you're an entrepreneur, to do it as well, to look at where am I against my goals? What are the things that are going to move the needle the furthest this week? And let's make sure that I put time into that today rather than I'll just wait till Wednesday or Thursday to get that done because I got a bunch of emails I got to respond to now. That is not a good way to move the ball down the field in the right direction, as I know that you know. So
Yeah.
this end-to-end sales system on how to do the right things at the right time with metrics to back up your decisions. So at the end of the day, I did take action in the right areas. Ben, talk to us about where we could find out more about you, about Clary, because we built the system that your platform handles for salespeople. So any CROs listening to this, they're going to want to get into that and try it out for sure. So where do we get deeper into your world?
Yeah, Sean. And first of all, thank you so much for having me. And you were so much more eloquent in putting my comments into the correct bullets, which I loved. If you want more information, I think there's two things that I would look at. One, yes, of course, our platform is great. You can check that out at clary.com or LinkedIn me. But more specifically, I think probably the beneficial thing for this on how do you actually develop the system is you can actually go to our website, download our 13-week revenue cadence and how we do this internally. So you can look at the metrics we look at week over week. You can look at the views we look at and what data is there. You can use any tool or platform if you want, of course, but I think we will help provide the process, as that's the really, really important thing to make sure that you're shoring up the process and driving that improvement. And that's all available at clary.com.
Awesome. And your platform does integrate to CRMs. So it's not
Correct.
like it's a standalone. This is a bolt-on that you could really use
Correct.
to get that crystal ball in your business.
Absolutely.
Ben, awesome, man. Thank you so much for doing that for us. And then for Bulletproof Selling here, if you're catching us on the live stream on YouTube, hit subscribe. And if you're listening on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, anywhere that podcasts can be found, leave us a review and let other salespeople know. Hope no longer has to be part of your strategy. With the insights of folks like Ben, you can remove hope from how you sell and how you serve. Ben, thanks for giving some time to us to serve the sales community today with